Talent development leader. For years, you have trusted ATD to develop your team. Now ATD is elevating its content, communities, and capabilities to develop you. Talent development leader is ATD's brand for your professional development, providing content that fosters and promotes your thought leadership, community that progresses with your career, and capabilities backed by ATD's capability model that keep you on the leading edge of the field. Welcome to ATD's Talent Development Leader podcast, featuring monthly conversations with the greatest influencers in the talent development field. We cover the latest trends, hot topics, and future-focused ideas that current and aspiring TD leaders need to know. Learn more by visiting www.td.org and searching for Talent Development Leader podcast. Today, we are talking about how to be an exceptional executive coach. Our talent development leader listeners represent a broad range of coaching experience, from dabbling in internal coaching roles in their organizations to building external practices, and everything in between. And many are intrigued by the idea of executive coaching as a career at some point in the future. Joining us today are executive coaching experts, Dr. Nadine Greiner and Becky Davis, co-authors of the brand new ATD Press book, The Executive Coaching Playbook: How to Launch, Run, and Grow Your Business, available for purchase now on Amazon and wherever books are sold. Dr. Nadine Greiner is an executive coach with a dual doctorate in organization development and clinical psychology. She has helped more than 1,000 executives and coaches become more effective and fulfilled at work, which has positively rippled out to thousands of their colleagues and transformed their businesses. Recognized for her immense success rate, Nadine has more than 30 years of experience in the field of executive coaching in San Francisco and globally. In addition to her advanced academic preparation, Nadine has held several high-level positions in privately held and publicly traded companies and served as CEO at the age of 38. This unique combination of psychology, business, and executive leadership makes her a unique and effective coach who produces excellent results for her clients. Nadine speaks and lectures in postgraduate programs globally. Becky Davis is an executive coach, a team facilitator, and a leadership trainer. She has held senior positions in human resources and marketing over her 30-year career, operating at the executive level for market-leading technology and healthcare companies. Her company, Insight Leadership, works with leaders and their teams to achieve excellence individually and in their shared work. Becky has a master's in business administration with an emphasis in management and organizational development and an undergraduate degree in organizational and leadership communications. She is a certified senior professional career coach and integral coach. With insight and global experience from more than 30 years in leadership roles, Becky consults on team effectiveness, talent management, organizational change, and strategy. She coaches executives and senior leaders, partnering to explore new possibilities to create more of the outcomes they desire personally and professionally. Nadine and Becky, so happy to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thrilled to be here. Thank you, Anne.
Now, before we get into the topic of executive coaching, which we'll be exploring today, I'd love to learn more about each of you and how you came together through your journey with your latest project, the Executive Coaching Playbook. So can you tell us a little bit more about your individual careers and how they've merged recently when you decided to write this book? Nadine, let's start with you.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to kick this off and tell the unique story about how Becky and I met. I think it's truly a story of community supporting community, women supporting women, and just really doing our best work together. And we were in an HR forum on Zoom. And it was the time to go around and just kind of put out what we want for ourselves this year. And I had this third book in me that I'd been carrying for a couple of years, but Yeah, I'm a kind of a slow writer. I mean, it doesn't come easy to me. It's a laborious process. And I just thought, you know what? I'll just throw it out there. Does anybody know how to write? Help me write this book. And Becky's hand slowly went up and she said, I know I can write. I'm pretty sure I can help you with that. And so hence started our journey of co-writing this book together. Becky, do you want to add anything to that story?
Yeah, I think it is such a unique way we came together, and we've reflected several times since then. This is a couple of years back now, of like just the serendipity of both of us being in this forum at the same time, and choosing to be there, having that question asked, and then Nadine being willing to put out there that she's looking for help, and me, sort of owning a strength I have in writing that is not always something I'm not always so good at claiming my own strengths. But in that way, I was like, it was a slow hand raise, but I was like very confident in that hand raise.
I love the context of relationship here. I think that's such a powerful lens for coaching, as we'll talk about on this podcast episode. And also the skills, right? Recognizing your own skills, your own strengths, and what you're bringing to the table. And I think that's also a kind of a needle will thread in our conversation today about coaching. So thank you so much for sharing that. Please tell listeners how you have observed the field of executive coaching transform over the years. I know, Nadine, you've been in this field for quite some time, over 30 years. What trends have you seen kind of come and go? And what do you think is really important to highlight today?
Yeah, thank you, Anne. I mean, I think I've been in this field since before it was a field. I used to call it individual consulting. And my main client at the time was Bank of America. So I built up this training and individual consulting business that then I sold to Bank of America and then became part of Bank of America myself as a VP of organization development. So I remember back then trying to describe what I did at parties and events. And so I am just very, very excited. My heart is warmed by the flooding of coaches of all kinds. I mean, I think there's really a democratization of the coaching process where almost anyone can be a coach. It's almost like collectively we've tapped into people wanting to help other people, which is really lovely and nice. And, I just think about how I've used coaches. I moved a couple of years ago and I hired a personal organizing coach. And I've used her ever since for various personal and professional projects. Like every coaching relationship is very different. And I love that we're helping each other. I think for coaching excellence in terms of the realm of executive coaching, however, I think it's really important now than ever that the executive coach have been an executive themselves, that they have been some kind of leader within an organization, because the experience is just so unique. And there's so many things that are left unsaid. You only know by being in that position. And I think it's really important to understand human motivation and to have a methodology. And I say this because there's an increasing risk for leaders, especially diverse leaders, due to the scrutiny by not just by shareholders that you would expect, especially in a public company, but also by social media. We're kind of really eroding the line between personal life and business life. And it's important to have an executive coach who is discreet and really understands those dynamics. So I see coaching firms popping up. I see AI popping up. And I think these are all good developments, and it's only the beginning. The only thing I would caution our readers and our listeners here today is just think about consumer privacy. When you take notes for your clients, if you're part of a firm or you're using AI, it's an unregulated field right now. So there's no state licensing. So there's no license to gain or lose. It's not really protected by privacy laws. So, those are personal notes that you're taking. And so be very careful with your clients' information. So I have certain ways that I keep my records, for example, that are not on the cloud and they're stored in a lockbox. And maybe I go to extreme, because I coach CEOs, but a lot of what we hear is highly, highly confidential. And so I think coaching firms in AI, especially, or individual practitioners, there's a trend there that we really need to protect our clients.
Becky, anything to add from your time in the field and what you've been experiencing recently?
Yeah, I will say, just to add, one of the things I've noticed that has shifted among clients over the last, probably 10 years is coaching used to be something that you kind of got sent to, if you were a leader. You were either maybe in a new role or just got promoted, or perhaps are having some challenges, and a company wanted to, invest in you to help retain you and help you grow as a leader. And it wasn't really broadly talked about. It was sort of like this, I'm going to go see my coach now, and not a point of sort of pride. And I've noticed a really big shift recently where there is a lot of interest in coaching. I think employees and leaders have seen the impact that effective coaches can have on individuals and on the organizations, teams, and company. And there's a real desire to have that kind of one-on-one support. And as Nadine mentioned, like a confidential space to really share what's real and what's going on, and work on some sort of deep development for oneself to emerge as a stronger leader. And so it's been really fun to see it go from this, I'm going to go talk to my coach, to like, I've got a coach and I got to go now because I've got to go talk to my coach. It's almost a point of pride, which I think is a great testament to the impact that coaching can have that's visible beyond the single individual.
I talk to a lot of executives, leaders, and talent development. And I think really within the past 5 years or so, it's this, when they look at their career and kind of next steps, right? Post-executive level, coaching always comes up, right? Oh, I'd really love to coach, really, and it may be because they've had really powerful experiences in their own careers. I also think, as you both have mentioned, the field has transformed so much to be just accessible to so many more people, transforming not so much going to a coach for bad behavior experience, but rather to be empowered into a new place in your career. So it's been interesting for me to observe that as well. So likely we have many listeners who are interested in now or someday growing into a role as an executive coach themselves. You talk in your book a lot about the skills needed to be an exceptional executive coach, and you unpack a 4-step coaching process to guide leaders in this role. I won't give away all your secrets because we want folks to obviously learn that themselves from your book. But can you give listeners an overview of what you think are some of the most important competencies for an executive coach to master?
We're not big, Becky and me, about coaching in the moment. We like a nice 4-step process so that the client can know where they are and the executive coach can know where they are in the process, and also anybody funding the effort, right? Whether it's an organization or a firm. And so the first is to have a true deep assessment. The second is to formulate a plan. It's often an individual development plan. And then the third is to do the work. That phase is about growth. And then the fourth is kind of a recap and of the success and a parting of ways, a very mindful parting of ways in graduation. So those are the 4 steps that are outlined in great detail in the book and will help the readers and listeners kind of master those skills in that process. And then I think beyond that, kind of what we call more functional skills or competencies. Obviously, the first one is listening. And it's a deep listening. It's not, oh, that reminds me of, this happened to somebody else that was similar. And here, let me give you some advice how to fix that situation. No, it's listening at a much deeper level. And maybe some of this is my clinical training that comes in as a clinical psychologist, but we're listening for context in the situation. Then we're also listening to any kind of feelings that are being evoked. and tapping for a motivation to hook into that can help our clients then kind of move out of that state that they're in and explore other competencies they might gain or other choices that they can make. So listening is very key to learn how to listen in this new way. The second thing I'd emphasize, and I say this is true especially for beginning coaches, is courage. Sometimes some of the training schools say, the client has the answer deep in them, and if you just listen and ask smart questions, they'll get there. Well, no. I mean, the thing is, if they had the answers, they would fix it already, or they'd be at their goal already. So to have the courage to throw out what instinctively you're feeling as an executive coach, to show or to state a reflection, a courage to dream bigger than your client is dreaming for themselves, a courage to brainstorm, courage to challenge maybe a thought pattern or a way of thinking that's habitual for that executive. So, if you're feeling it, take that courage, take that step. You can use language around it to protect yourself, like, let's hypothesize, or I wonder if, or stick with me, let's do this experiment. But really, honestly, at the end of the day, it's two people communicating and connecting in a very special, unique way. So seize that opportunity.
Yeah. We are of one mind in that answer. That was very similar to kind of where my head was going when I heard Anne's question. And just to kind of double down on the listening skill set, I would say, listening for what's said and what's underneath what's said. Because it's often what's sort of behind the challenge that someone may be having that is perhaps more systemic or pervasive, kind of shows up in lots of different situations, and it just happens to be showing up in this particular one. So the topic they're bringing, to the table is important to talk about. That's the thing that brings them to the table. But the issue underneath it that is perhaps a bit more developmental is a great rich place to explore that, potentially could help them address pervasive challenges, repetitive challenges, and start to understand sort of what is it about this thing that's challenging for me, or what is it that's hard for me, or how am I holding myself back in this way? That's not usually the kind of first topic that a person brings to the table. It's something a bit more sort of practical and applied, but that thing underneath, there's so much richness in that issue underneath the topic.
But from your experience, what are some of the most high impact ways that folks can gain these skills? Is it truly just by doing, by having the experience, by being a coach, the deep listening, the courage? Any insights on that, or maybe ahas you've had in your careers where you're like, this is really a high impact or powerful way to gain these skills?
I do think that we learn the most by doing. I mean, if you think about Kirkpatrick's 4 ways of learning or depths of learning, it is definitely repetition that hardwires that. Now, how to get experience is there's many ways you can coach friends and family within a structured environment. You can have co-coaches. So let's say if a listener knows somebody who's also going through a program or wants to advance their coaching skills, you can set up a mutual relationship where you're practicing with each other. And it can be practicing on any one of the 4 steps. So you can practice your assessment. You can practice setting that IDP. You can practice, what it's like to do the homework, because you're going to be you are an executive coach. Well, what's that like to be on the other side of it and be in a co-coaching relationship where now you're doing the homework as the client? Practice that step 4 of saying goodbye. There are lots of organizations, there's state and governments ones where you can coach, and sometimes it's free of charge, but it's so worth it to coach small business owners or entrepreneurs who are starting up like local small businesses to support the community or offer local services and products. And, I had one of my executive coaches, somebody's dream job had been to set up a corner shop. that specialized in snacks and wine. And, they had never done it before. They were a local family that lived up the block. It was the daughter. And, this coach made a huge difference to that person. And it was all for free. And it was all through a government program for small businesses. So there's many ways to get the practice. You don't want your first client to be a VP level, right? You want to have many hours before that. And this is after you've done your certification and you have your methodology and you have all of that in place. Then I think learning or honing the skill by practicing is definitely, I think, key.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with that. Like, doing is the thing. That's what we talk about with our clients. We can know something and talk about something all we want, but until we practice a new way and reflect and take the learnings out of that, it's not really going to yield much impact for us. And I think that's true for us as coaches. And, the only thing I would add to Nadine's great answer is if you have a community of coaches in your area or other entrepreneurs in your area, join that community. It can feel like a lonely journey, doing this work as an entrepreneur. And so having a community of people that are similarly minded, doing similar work is a great place to plug in and share what you're learning, share what you're reading about, share something that's having impact for you and your clients, so that you can stay, as Nadine said, in that continuous learning mindset in a community.
We've talked a lot about relationships already. I'd like to get into that a bit more. And in particular, the role of relationships in coaching. And Nadine, you've alluded to this. In your book, you state that the effective coaching relationship is both profound and temporary, which is one of the reasons it is unique and powerful for both the coach and the client. Nadine, what would you emphasize for listeners about the power of relationships in coaching?
The first part starts with the executive coach and specifically our mindset as an excellent executive coach is that we know going in that our job is to work ourselves out of a job, that the mark of success is that graduation day where our client has achieved the goals that we set out together for them. And, I say that because I see many coaches who have a hard time connecting first. And then when they connect, they have a hard time letting go. And, the coaching relationship is all 100% in service of the client. And so to come into it with that, and you wouldn't necessarily say that, obviously, but just to have that as a mindset to help move clients through the 4 steps of coaching. And so I think that's one key thing. The second concept is to meet the client exactly where they are. And we talked about deep listening. Sometimes the clients will come into a session and things they're talking about have nothing to do with their IDP that we had set out for them. And it doesn't really move them down the tracks. But the key to get them there is to start where they are. So start by listening and acknowledging where they are, then tie that into the progress that we said that we wanted to make together and get them on track. And often where they are, the chaos that they come into the session with is often because where they need to make progress on those goals that we've set out, those competencies that we've set out, whether it's strategic agility, for example. If we've got an executive who needs to work on strategic agility, often what they come into the session with is, a sense of chaos. Mm-hmm. And that's because they're not flexing maybe their mental mindsets. And so they need to strengthen that strategic agility and be able to see business problems or interpersonal problems at work with a different lens or flex that thinking. And so, that's the second thing is meet them where they are, exactly where they are, and then morph back into the journey of deeper transformation within that coaching relationship. So you can move them along the 4-step process and they can get to their goals more quickly and you can graduate them on out. So again, just to summarize, it's always that relationship is solely in service of that client, and it's important to stick to that.
Becky, I'd love to hear from you if we could look at the other side of the coach-client relationship. So most likely some of our listeners are leaders who are interested in getting a coach for themselves. In your experience, what qualities have clients had that made for the most effective coach-client relationship? In other words, how do you recommend clients show up for their executive coaches?
Yeah, that's such a rich question. I think three things come to the surface first. One is, I think some motivation, clarity around what you are seeking and engaging with an executive coach, whether you're directly doing it yourself or you're being encouraged or supported by your company to attend. This is a big investment in time, both in coaching sessions and in some ways, more importantly, in between the coaching sessions, doing the work, doing the practices, reflecting, kind of trying to extract their own insights. So what are you looking for, in terms of outcomes? And those become really important anchors in the individual development plan that Nadine mentioned. So people who don't really know what they're after can kind of feel like they're wandering a little bit, or wanting someone to tell them. And that's, as adults, we don't respond super well to someone telling us. So it's important to have your own point of view about what you're after. I think a willingness to be vulnerable. It is a unique relationship that we have the honor to cover some pretty deep topics with these individuals. And just a willingness to be open to that really helps individuals kind of explore what can be very meaningful for them. These are often individuals who are highly successful, have reached a senior level, and have done that through tremendous effort, insight, intelligence. So having a space where they're willing to kind of talk about what's real for them can be very powerful. And their willingness to talk about what's real is, I think, where the power comes from. And lastly, and I'm certain Nadine will have things she wants to add to this, so I'll just say one more thing, which is be willing to do the work. I am often surprised by leaders who will agree to practices or assignments and then, a week later or 2 weeks later come back a little bit like hat in the hand, like, oh, I didn't do the thing. And, often will have very legitimate good reasons why they didn't make the time to practice what was agreed to. That becomes a whole nother coaching conversation, of course, that in and of itself. But the beauty of this work is in the individual being willing to do the work. And so making sure that there's intention there and time secured for that, which is something that is cared for, really early in the process, so that both people, both the coach and client, have confidence that there's enough of a support structure for the client to practice and engage in the work even in between the coaching sessions.
I think to add to that, we mentioned before, step one of the coaching process is assessment. And that assessment has two pieces to it. The first is a 360. So the client decides, who they want the coach to interview, either in person or using technology. And the second is, some kind of profile or leadership assessment. And so from the very beginning, we get a really clear kind of X-ray picture of who our client is in the eyes of others, and then kind of at a deeper level. And all that information plus the client's goals go into the individual development plan that Becky was just referencing, that we try our very best to keep our clients to, and to re-engage them in a deeper way if the client stays surfacey or is now resistant to doing the work, is I will then reflect back on the 360 and will pull out sometimes direct quotes to re-engage and remotivate the client, or to add that additional context. Or we'll see where the barrier is, potentially in their Myers-Briggs, for example, or their conflict inventory. And if, let's say, they're conflict avoidant and their project has kind of run away like a runaway train, no wonder they're having a challenge getting back on top of it, because they don't want to have those crucial conversations with the other people in the project to get them all back on track. And so, I'll anchor it back to the assessment and everything I know about them to keep them going on their journeys so that they can meet their professional and career goals and organizational goals. And we can move them down the track of these 4 steps.
Thank you so much. I think our listeners are kind of on both sides here, right? They're certainly interested in and may already fill executive coaching roles, but they are executives themselves who may currently have a coach or be looking for one. So I think really looking at the relationship from both sides is incredibly helpful, and some excellent tips here for listeners as well.
I do think, just to interject, if you are spending a lot of time being an executive coach, I myself have always had an executive coach of my own. And maybe that's my clinical background too. As a psychologist, I always had a psychologist of my own too. And, we all have our blind spots, and it's important to walk the walk as well. And I've had a coach help me with the business side of setting up my business, and I've sold 2 businesses. And now I'm looking at potentially writing some more and retiring, or at least working a lot less and just coaching at the C-level only. And that coach really helped me. And then I had a coach who was, I've just had different coaches at different points help me with different aspects. But I've had one executive coach who has spanned kind of most of the last, I'd say, 15 years. And that relationship morphs over time as well.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned the business aspect, Nadine, and it's a good transition to touch on that. Certainly, half of your book talks about how to be an excellent executive coach, but there's a whole other half that talks about how to start your own business. And you mentioned more than 80 templates or tools for folks who read the book to use, to take away, to help them do the work, which is really exciting. So I'd love to talk a little bit today about that aspect of the conversation and of your book. What words of advice would you have for someone who is not only interested in being an executive coach, but in being an entrepreneur, right? So in building their own business, what first small steps could they start to take today?
I'll go first. I think the first thing is to just schedule time. We always tend to underestimate how much administrative time it takes to set up a business and maintain a business. Everything, the taxes, the ongoing insurance payments, the strategic plan for the business, the marketing the business, billing, all of those things, the maintenance of the website, all these things take time. And the number one thing that I see is that people are ill prepared for that as an executive coach. Maybe it's their first time running a business or setting up a business, and they don't realize that setting time kind of takes off that pressure. So at the beginning of the month, maybe just say, I'm going to spend 5 hours a week this month on the business side. And that's just the time that it's going to take. And I think it really helps with the sense of overwhelm and the running away from, all the details that are involved. It helps just to make that time and say so at the outset. The second thing I would say is, you're not the only person who's starting a business or marketing a business. There's plenty of books, people, communities, mentors to learn from. And there's templates, of course, in the book that will really help you. And your professionals that you involve, like your tax preparer, also has their own community. So you can lean on the professionals that you engage to help you, as well as your community. So those are the 2 things that I would say. 1 is make the time, and 2 is use your resources and your connections.
Yeah, I would add, in the resource area, the Small Business Administration is such a powerful source of information, workshops, communication, colleagues, people who, are, like Nadine said, are starting their own business in web design and looking for clients. And you're like, gosh, I'm someone who wants to start my business, but I don't want to build my own website. So there's such a great synergistic community there that is both kind of filling up your own insight and knowledge about your skills aligned with being an entrepreneur, and then having a community of people who can fill maybe some of those gaps that you have in your own skill set or your own interest. Things that you can do, but you maybe don't want to do all that much, don't want to spend your time doing. And in the book, we talk about there's, sort of buckets of type of work and making sure, like Nadine said, that you're caring for building time into your schedule for all of the different kinds of work that is necessary to do this work. It's not simply sitting down one-on-one with somebody, on an ongoing kind of routine basis and working with them on their goals. There's all this support structure that underpins that and surrounds that to make that effective. So building time in and partnering with people to fill in the gaps.
Depending on how you structure your coaching time, how you structure the business side, there's a relationship between those two. So, for example, if you're the kind of coach who sees your client A weekly at such and such time, then it's easier to schedule your business side of your coaching practice. But if you're the kind of coach that bills monthly and you're available as needed for your client, which is a lot more my model, because I'm coaching more C-level people and they need you when they need you. And that's great for me too, because that's when the lessons are learned, is in the heat of that moment. And so then you have to kind of work the other sides of the business, the building the business, the administrative side. It's harder to schedule it. So, because it could be interrupted at any point. So that's something to think about too, is how you structure your time for your sessions or your client time.
I like that there's a structure for coaching, right? There's a 4-step model, 4-step method to follow. There's a structure needed for building your business. So certainly lots of synergy there as well. I'm sure listeners have many questions that we haven't gotten to today, and might be interested in following up with either of you. Please tell them how they might be able to do that. Where can they learn more? And if they'd like to continue the conversation, how can they?
Well, I know both of us are active on LinkedIn, and so you can find both of us on LinkedIn as a good touch base point. I invite people to come to my company's website, insightleadership.net, to learn more about the programs that we offer for teams and individuals, and look forward to the opportunity to continue the conversation with listeners and in future forums as we continue to talk about this powerful book.
Yeah, I'd second that. You can Google Nadine Greiner. You'll see my website, drnadine.com, drnadine.com. I'm on, Instagram, Twitter, like most of all of the social platforms. So if you just kind of want to see what I'm doing, I have dedicated my career to advancing the field of HR, and I consider executive coaching is within that field of human resources. It's the people side of the business. And so I do teach first-time CHRO classes through Biocom. So if you want to come into those classes, Biocom's a nonprofit. At this point in my career, it really is about giving back and nurturing those who are coming in and thriving in our field of human resources and executive coaching. And in terms of me coaching, I only really coach CEOs at this point. So feel free to reach out if you might know somebody, but I'm pretty booked all the time. So I'd say read the books. There's all 3 of them are on Amazon.
Thank you both. This has been such a rich conversation. Folks, listeners, again, encourage you, the Executive Coaching Playbook, How to Launch, Run, and Grow Your Business. Get your copy on Amazon or wherever books are sold. Please feel free to reach out to Becky Davis and Dr. Nadine Greiner to learn more, to continue the conversation. And thank you both for being here today.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you for listening to this podcast by the Association for Talent Development. If you found this show insightful or useful, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with a colleague.